my kids never see me rude to anybody, ever. Never rude to a server at a restaurant. I'm never rude when on the phone with customer service. They'll never hear me cuss anybody out. They'll never hear me lose my temper on somebody unless that somebody is trying to do harm to somebody else that I love. They will never see me intentionally try to hurt somebody's feelings, right? Now, I may hurt someone's feelings unintentional by something I say, and if I'm made aware of that, they'll see me apologize and own up to my mistakes and things like that. They'll never see me with intentionality hurt someone, right? It's just not going to happen. Welcome to Burning the Ships podcast, and I'm your host, Jason Seward. And today, again, I am solo. It's, I think, three out of the last 4 weeks or 3 out of the last 5 weeks I've done solo episodes, and I've talked about it a little bit on some of the previous ones, but kind of as we're wrapping, I'm recording this December 30th, I believe, and so it'll come out January 4th. But as we've kind of wrapped up the year, I have kind of slowed down on scheduling any guests because, well, I have several scheduled, and I had some stuff come up where I had to reschedule a couple that were back to back a couple weeks ago, and then a few other guests had to reschedule to January. So we got some exciting guests coming up as we get into the new year, but just end of the year things get a little hectic for everybody trying to close out whatever they've been working on, and I'm certainly no exception to that. So here you get me solo for the last few weeks. So this week I'm going to talk about probably something that is top of mind for me. It leads just about everything I do, and that is the idea of setting a model for my children, being a good role model, being a good example, not just preaching to them about how to do things or how to live life. And I'll get into all that as we go further into this episode. But I'm going to talk about my perspective and my thoughts on that and how I choose to approach it. Some of the things I've done wrong, some of the things that I'll continue to probably be sloppy with as I continue to parent my kids into adulthood. But some of the things that I think that have served both my wife and I well as parents as we try to raise our kids and set good examples for them and so on. So before we get into that, speaking of my kids, I'll turn it over to my youngest, JJ, for JJ's joke of the week. Take it away, buddy.
Why can't your nose be 12 inches long? Because then it would be a foot.
All right, that is my man, my youngest, JJ. So I'll kind of set the table for folks that haven't followed along with the podcast or kept up with everything I've got going on. But I have 2 kids. I have a 14-year-old daughter, Emma, and a 9-year-old son, JJ. And they are my life, everything to me. Everything I have done, decisions I've made, maturity that I've made throughout my adult life, all the actions I do, the reflections I do, everything centers around those 2 individuals. And of course my wife, who, we're in a partnership with all of this. So, and I thought, I think about this a lot, definitely as I move through every single day. But I observe a lot of other families and children and parents and stuff. And at the end of the day, what I've kind of come to the realization of really recently, I've always been aware of it, but as parents, we are all just trying to figure it out, right? And we're all doing it in our own clumsy ways that we think is right in the moment. We reflect on it. Hopefully parents, as they move along through parenthood, take time to reflect on what they could have done better, what they've done good, and use that information to be better and do things in their mind better moving forward. But none of us are getting it exactly right. All of us are botching it here and there. We're making some good decisions. We're making some poor decisions, but at the end of the day, um, I try to be hyper aware of all of those decisions all the time and what type of influence they're having on my kids. Currently, and as it shapes them and their development into becoming adults. And they're going to be parents one day, and they're going to find a wife or a husband one day, hopefully. And they'll be modeling a lot of the things, or taking actions, and a lot of things they do are going to be based off what they saw as a model from me and my wife. So where I'm going to go with this one is kind of some of the things that are top of mind to me when it comes to setting an example, and things that I'll kind of go down the list of priorities for me when I'm thinking through what I want my kids to observe and what I hope they take from that. So first and foremost, it's going to be how we interact as a family inside the walls of our house, right? That is our most sacred place on earth, our house, right? There's four of us living there. We spend most of our time there, and that is a place where we're all most comfortable, most, intimate with one another, just in our relationships. We can have big emotions with each other within those four walls. We can talk about things that don't go outside of those walls. And so, with all that said, it's very important for my wife and I, Katie and I, to establish our home as the safest place on the planet, right? That our home and the love that we bring in it, and the environment that we're fostering within those four walls, is their safest place they can be, right? That's where they can be their most, and talking about my kids, they can be their most vulnerable. They can share all their emotions. They can be wild and free, all of those things. So we want to provide first and foremost that safety. And within that, we want to model for them how to let good and bad emotions just come out, right? Be vulnerable with your emotions, right? So we try to model that for them. And how do we do that? Well, we want to set a model and a culture within our house of just love, right? I mean, love and gratitude. So we, it the L word, love, gets thrown around in my house. It is probably the most said word in our dictionary, right? And within our house. And that's intentional. My wife and I, all day, every day, we tell each other we love. Now, I'm not following my wife around. I love you, I love you, I love you. That'd be a little weird. Probably not the example I want to set. But we don't walk out of that house without saying I love you. We don't wake up in the morning without saying I love you. We don't go to bed without saying I love you. We throw out random I love yous all the time. I love you. Hugs and kisses, and just like complete avoidance of anything other than love, right? So that is what our house is. And that's the model we want for our kids, because we want them, you see a lot of people that were not raised with that, right? They were not in a household or an environment or a family that expressed a lot of love, right? And some of those individuals that go through that, or maybe lack that in their childhood or upbringing, then go one or two ways. They can be just like the model they saw growing up, or it could be the exact opposite. That was kind of traumatic for them to not have all that love thrown around, and they want to be the exact opposite. So they're extreme the other way, right? Very loving and very expressing of that love. Well, for us, we think it's important to, whether our kids develop as adults into what they're seeing in our house, we want them to look back and reflect back on a house full of love, right? I've got folks that are very close to me that talk about how they never heard their parents say I love you to one another, right? That's, to me, that's crazy, right? Not that those individuals are crazy, but the thought of as an adult, and I have these little eyeballs on me all the time and these little ears on me all the time, not hearing me tell my wife I love you a lot every day. Like that is it. I can't fathom that. And I can't fathom my kids not being raised seeing that where they're comfortable sharing I love you. And furthermore, you hear some folks say that their parents never told them they love them, right? And that's not uncommon, but it's something that like I want the love word thrown around very, very openly in my house and even to their friends, right? Like my close friends, I tell them I love them, right? Openly. Dudes, like guys in my life that I truly love, I tell them I love them. And, it might be awkward to some people, and some people hear it and don't know who I am and hear me tell another grown man, I love you, dude, as I'm giving him a hug. Could come off as a little weird, but I want my kids to see a model that it is okay to love people and it's okay to express it. And not only is it okay, it's the healthiest version of life in my opinion, and that's what I want them to see. So first and foremost, my wife and I are very honed in on modeling that for our kids. Love is something that you guard it, right? You don't give your true passionate love to every person on this planet. You can lead with love, right? You can have love for folks in the way that you respect them and you are kind to them and grateful for time spent with them. But like that true I love you is something reserved for folks that you genuinely love, right? You have a passionate sense of connection with them and you love them, right? And we want to teach our kids that when you have those people in your life, don't be hesitant to let them know that you love them because it feels good. It feels good to say it. It feels good to receive it. And for folks that aren't used to that might not feel as natural to receive, but that's kind of where we start. Another thing we want to model is, and I mentioned it just a second ago, is gratitude, right? So we, you know, we're very fortunate if we live in the country we live in America, and I'm sitting in a room right now with lights on, and it's cold outside, but I'm warm. I can go to the fridge in my office, and I have food and drinks and anything I need there. There are, all the luxuries of life or the necessities of life we have. So we are very fortunate, and for that, I am grateful to have been born in a place where all that is possible for me to achieve. And I express that gratitude, just thankful to get up every day and to be able to walk around and to be able to see the sun shining and to be able to hug my family and to be able to travel when we have time for it or to be able to eat a good meal and all that stuff. I'm grateful. If I don't express that gratitude every day and do so openly, then my kids are not going to see that as again, just like the love thing, they're not going to see gratitude as a priority, right? To do gratitude exercises, whether that, a lot of people do formal gratitude exercises where they literally have a notebook or whatever method they're using to write down things they're grateful for every day. That's something that my daughter does, right? She has a notebook beside her bed. Now, she's not 100% consistent with it, but most days, a lot of days, and I have to remind her a lot because it's not quite a habit for her, but to grab that book and just write down 3 things you're thankful for. And if it's generic things like I'm thankful to be alive, I'm thankful to have a bed, and I'm thankful to have a good family, write them over and over and over. But it gets you in that habit of making gratitude a priority, right? Reflect on the things you're grateful for. And why that's important is if you lead with that every day, just reflect and be thinking about the things that you have in your life that are compared to the rest of the planet, it's luxury, right? Again, heat, lights, food, all these things. And you can be thankful for the small things and the big things in your life, the luxurious things in your life. But the more you can reflect on those, the more it keeps you in that positive frame of mind and keeps you out of that woe is me mentality, right? So that's kind of the next thing. We want to model for our kids the gratitude, and we want to model for them an environment where we are not complaining, right? I and it's yes, I complain about some things. If it's cold outside and it's real cold and I'm just tired of it being cold, my kids every once in a while might hear me like, God, I just can't wait till summer gets here, right? Well, that's not being grateful. I'm also grateful for the ability to walk outside, right? But at times I do, and my wife does, we express um, some negativity towards a situation, right? But that's not the norm. The norm is we're grateful and we are going to find ways to find things to be grateful for, right? And not get into this negative trench where we're talking about any or all of the bad things that are in our lives, right? So any human being on this earth, if they wanted to really prioritize like all the quote unquote bad things they have going on, you don't have to look far. I can name a million things that if I'm just being selfish in my own bubble that are inconvenient to me, right? And that I am negative about or I can be negative about, right? Again, I just mentioned it's cold outside right now. When I walked into this office today, the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour and it's freezing cold. Well, I could go down that rabbit hole and talk about how negative it is, right? Um, I can talk about how I, it I could think of a bunch of examples where I could think of things that are negative that could bog me down, and I don't do that, right? And my kids don't see that as a model. So what the model that I and the example I'm setting for them is it is best to focus on the things that are positive in your life, right? And even the negative things, try to figure out how to make them a positive. And we model that for them every day, right? So I'm not saying that modeling these things for your kids is going to, guarantee that every kid is going to grow up, become an adult, and be the thing that you're modeling, right? Not guaranteeing that. But it is a very, very good chance that if you're modeling good behavior that gets good results and they can see that correlation of, oh, positive attitude brings more positivity, being grateful brings more things to be grateful about, and being kind brings kindness to you, being loving brings love back your way, and it's all kind of a give and take, and they see that correlation, then it's a high likelihood that they are going to um, uh, develop into that same mindset and that same behavior and those same model for their kids and people that are around them. So it's very important. So where the next few things I'm gonna get into is like everything I've said so far: love, gratitude, trying to stay away from negativity. I model that. I actively, and my wife actively approaches life that way, right? We give them that example. They see it every day. And typically your kids, if there's a lot of love and connection with you and your kids, they're going to do what you do, right? They're going to, in their own little way, but they're going to evolve into what you are. Some other things that I have to really like, the things I've listed so far, not things that I have to work at. I don't really have to work at being positive. It's who I am. I don't have to work at showing love. That's how I was raised, and now my wife, not so much, right? She's from a very loving family, but I love yous were not thrown around her house as openly as they were in my house, right? Affection and the touchy feely, huggy, kissy, that kind of stuff. She wasn't raised in that environment like I was. So for her, she likes the style of that touchy feely, lovey, I love you, kissing, hugging, all that stuff constantly. She prefers that. So she has, as an adult, developed into that. And it is a little different than what she was used to, or the model that was set for her. Not a negative thing. It's just, that's the way it is. But, for me, these things come natural, right? So I'm not having to work to set the example. The next few things I have to work at, right? And these are things that I have to constantly be aware of. And it starts with and I talk about it a lot on here, and I know to some folks it could be annoying, but my health and my wellness, that I have to work at. I have to constantly be thinking about, prioritizing that. And the biggest number one driver for that are my kids for a couple different reasons. Number one, it is very important to me to be healthy long into my life, not just to have a long lifespan, to live a long time, but to have a long health span where I'm living into those later decades of my life more vibrant, as healthy as I can possibly be. Now, I'll always say this when I say things like that, is I am very aware that anything can happen, right? I could find out in the next week that I have cancer, right? That could really if it's bad enough, it could damage my health and do a lot of negative things, right? And could cut that life and health span down quite a bit. I could get in a bad car accident tonight, right? It could happen. And all this goes out the window. But the things I control, as far as the daily inputs and activities that I'm involved with, the inputs into my body and the activities, the exercise and things like that, I can control that. Those things I'm going to try to do my very best to make sure I do them consistently. I stay on top of them so that I can be around for my kids, both for a long time, but be active into those later years. So that's number one important thing. The number two important thing is my kids see this, right? My kids are very aware of how much effort I put into staying healthy, right? They see me work out nonstop every day. They know it. My daughter, my son, not so much yet, but my daughter, because she does a daily workout, and I got to shout her out and two of her friends, which are Tim Blodgett's two sons, Talon and Riker. My daughter said to me, it's been over a year ago now. I think they started November. No, they started like September, I think, or October of last year, 2024. And she said to me, I remember it because during hunting season, we were riding in my truck, and she said to me, Dad, y'all have got this, you and Tim and Bill have this long workout streak. I would like to join it. And I was like, well, you don't have to do that. I said, why don't you come up with just a daily workout routine? So same thing you do every day, because I mean, she's a kid, got a lot going on. She's not going to devote an hour every day or 45 minutes to a workout. I said, well, why don't y'all do something that takes 10, 15 minutes? You got to do it every day. And the last one standing wins. So she challenged, Tim's two boys, Riker and Talon, and a couple of her other friends to do that. And JJ was in it initially too. He made it about a month until he just got mad one night, said he wasn't doing it, and he was out. Which a month for him, I was very surprised he made it that far. But Emma has been doing that, and Riker and Talon are still doing it. They text each other every single day. They've been doing it well over a year. They do the same workout, and I'm gonna botch it, but I'll try to get it right. It's 25 push-ups, 25 sit-ups, 25 air squats, and maybe 25 burpees or something like that. It's like 4 or 5 moves they do, 25 reps of every day. And they've done this every day. When Emma started, she could only do, without having to go to her knees and do push-ups, she could only do maybe 4 like real push-ups. She can get down now after a year plus of doing this and crank out 25 push-ups like it's no problem. Perfect form, no issues at all. So, yes, I'm bragging on my daughter, but I say all that to say she has that mentality and that willingness to do that, not because it just hit her one day. It's because she's seeing a model of that in me, right? And that, as a father, that's all I can ask for, right? I want my kids to be healthy. I want them to be mobile. I want them to move. I do not want them sitting in the house, sitting around on the couch. I don't, there's a time and place for that to rest, but I want their energy out and about and moving. So I can't sit here and say that that's what I want and expect of my kids and not model that same behavior for them. That makes no sense, right? And I see a lot of parents, and maybe some of you listen to this or fall in this category where you you say or you try to push your kids to be exceptional athletes or in the elite level of baseball or football or whatever sport they're playing. You try to push them to work hard. And I'm not going to call anybody out, but I see it almost right now. JJ is in wrestling, so I got to, right as I'm doing this, he's at wrestling practice. I got to go pick him up in a little bit. But most nights when he's in wrestling 3 nights a week, I go to the gym, the YMCA, while he's there, and I get my workout in. Well, every night, to his credit, there is a father there that has she's probably 15, 16-year-old daughter, and he's putting her through a workout, right? And he is very intense with her, like putting her through every move. But I've yet to see him do a single move himself. And I'm not judging based off looks, but based off what I see there, he's not in a gym modeling the same thing he's trying to get his daughter to do, right? He's just there coaching her. And good for him getting there, showing up for his daughter and coaching her. But I can tell she don't want to be there, right? She's being, and one way to help her get there and be a little more motivated is if he was modeling and maybe doing the workouts with her, right? So I say that because Emma, if she did not see me doing workouts every day, she would have never asked me to do a workout streak. If she did not see me sweating every day doing this stuff, she would not be motivated to be like dad, right? In that aspect. So the point I'm making there from a modeling standpoint and like setting in the example is I just let my actions do it, right? I've never, like, I try to encourage my kids to stay active. They're active as it is. They've got my DNA. I can't sit still ever. I'm never sitting down for 30 minutes to an hour to do these podcasts. That's hell on me. I love talking, love doing the podcast. I can't sit still, right? So my kids have a lot of that in them, but to channel that energy into something that's productive for them, like a workout or, something like that, they're not going to do that, at least at the ages they're at now, on their own, right? An example has to be set for them. So I do that. And my wife, she exercises in a different way than I do. It's not, hard, intense workouts like I do. But one thing they see with their mom is she doesn't sit around. My wife, Katie, does not sit around. It's funny because anybody knows my wife. My wife has always stayed fairly fit and, well into our age that we are now. But like I said, she doesn't work as hard at it like in the gym or anything like that. She's very active, but it's not like a routine workout. And I joke with her all the time. I'm like, it's frustrating watching how fit you stay or how, thin and small you stay without really having to, it doesn't seem you work at it. And she always says, I am on my feet all day, every day. She's a teacher. So she wears an Apple Watch. And a couple months ago, I was like, how many steps do you get a day? And she pulled up, I said, pull it up. She didn't even look at her steps, but she pulled it up because it tracks it. And over the course, this was probably back in October, we looked at it. This whole year, 2025, her average step count is a little over 20,000 steps a day. And she's not even trying to do that. So my point I'm making there is I model it in my own way. I'm doing exercise and stuff like that. Katie models it just by being active. She's always on the move, doing something, moving with purpose. Very rarely do the two of us, just sit down and relax. And when we do at nighttime and on weekends and stuff, but during the day, we're just active. So our kids see that as a model and they follow that model, right? It would be hypocritical of me and I did this, this is why I changed. And when Emma was very young, and it really went to hyper mode when JJ was born, back in 2016. But the, I wasn't very active for many years of working my corporate career. I was not very active at all. I sat around a lot, went to work, ate terribly, all that stuff. But later, once I started having kids, I said, no, I've got to set a better example for them. Long before I knew they were paying attention, they were just little. But I did that intentionally, because who am I to want my kids to sit here and say, as a father, I want my kids to be active and into all the sports, and not sitting around, not playing video games all the time, not watching TV and movies all day, every day. Who am I to say that, but then model something that's completely different, in the sense of, I'm sitting around watching TV every day, I'm eating terrible food, I'm not exercising, I'm playing video games, doing whatever, quote unquote, lazy stuff I want to do every day, but I'm telling them they need to be something different. I wasn't going to do that. So I had to change my behaviors and work really hard, and I still have to do that to model it for them so that they can follow that. Okay. So that's kind of, and eating is the same way, right? Kids are so picky, especially my son. He could live off chicken nuggets and mac and cheese for seemingly the rest of his life. But there are some things that he loves. Steak, he loves, a couple other things, pasta and stuff like that. So we have to try to creatively make those things throughout the week to keep him eating eating variety in his diet. But I want my kids to eat relatively healthy. I want them to have a low amount of processed food. I don't want them eating a ton of sugar and stuff like that. And right now, when they're young and their metabolism is on fire and they're burning through everything, it doesn't matter as much, but it does matter, because they're setting the habits now that I'm trying to, as a 44-year-old man, I'm still trying to unravel these bad eating habits that I have from childhood. I ate everything and drank all the sodas and all that stuff, and I've had to work really hard to get rid of those habits. Well, it's a lot easier if you can set those habits and set a good example early on in our kids' lives, so they just grow up into adulthood, and this is the way we eat. We eat healthy, and we eat bad stuff in moderation, right? So again, I can't tell them that. I can't preach that to my kids while I'm stopping at every McDonald's on every corner, or I'm eating potato chips every night, which I love a potato chip, or Oreos, or Chips Ahoy cookies, or whatever. I like all those things, and I still eat them. They're still in our house, but I do it in moderation. And they know that, those Oreos up in the cabinet, they're not available to anybody all day, every day. You're going to get them in moderation, a little bit at a time, or, on the weekends or something like that. And I'm modeling that. Again, they see how I eat. We joke about it a lot. Oh, Dad, Emma will come up and I'll be eating. The other night I was eating a bag of popcorn. You get some buttery popcorn in front of me, you better believe you get your own bag, because I'm going to eat my bag. Well, she poked my belly or something, did something funny about the popcorn. So it wasn't like, oh, Dad's just eating another bag of popcorn, that's how we eat around here. Oh, no, that's an exception. Dad's eating some popcorn. Let me pick on him a little bit for eating something unhealthy. That's because I've set a model for it. So last thing I want to talk about, and then I'll wrap this thing up, is the model of the idea of not having to work for somebody else, right? And both of my kids, and I will be perfectly fine with it if they go off to college, hone in on a very niche career, whether it's a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, a scientist, whatever it is that requires a lot of education, and you go on and you work for a company and you do great things. I will celebrate the hell out of that. I want to show my kids that there are other options as well, right? If their heart does not take them down that path I just described, and both of my kids are this way. They just have, and it's probably because they've seen how I do things, but they're very independent. They think on their own. They like to do things on their own, with their own intentions and their own, everything. So I want them to lean into that. Well, how do I help them lean into it. I model it for them. They watch their dad walk away from a very successful, from all aspects, a very successful career. They watched me work really hard at that career and build something for our family. And then they watched me transition into something where I had more freedom and flexibility and ownership of every day of my life. They've watched me do both things, right? And they've seen the power of both things. And they know by watching me as an example, that they have the ability to go and take a risk, take a gamble, not follow a conventional path. If both of my kids just tell me they don't want to go to college, I'm perfectly fine with it. In fact, if they don't know what they want to do, I'm not sure I want them to go to college, right? I'll give them that opportunity, but I don't care, right? I want them to pursue something they're passionate about and not go into something and get into the claws of what everybody else is doing just because everybody else is doing it, right? Want them to be free thinkers, and be independent in whatever path they take and not feel like they have to conform to a normal path that society is pushing them down, right? So how do I set that model for them? Well, I do the same thing, right? Every step I take is non-conventional, right? A lot of people think I am nuts every day because of some of the decisions I make. I make those decisions not just to be a contrarian to what the normal is, it's just where my brain takes me, right? So I have the confidence and the independence and the trust in myself to take these different paths and figure things out as I go. I want my kids to have that same confidence and resourcefulness. Now, whether they do it or not, I don't care. I mean, I do care, but they're going to be successful at whatever they try. But I want them to know that if they ever aren't passionate about what they're doing, there is another way, because I've set the model for them, right? I've shown them, they've grown up in a household that has watched their dad do this and shown them, not just tell them. I don't just tell them these things. I'm out there doing what I tell them, right? And that model will set them up again. No matter what they do, they will always have that confidence to know that if this doesn't work out, I can figure something out, right? And that resourcefulness, because I've not just told them the importance of having that, but I've shown them by my actions, right? There's a lot of other things that I can go into, and I've mentioned a little bit about being kind. My kids never see me rude to anybody, ever. Never rude to a server at a restaurant. I'm never rude when on the phone with customer service. They'll never hear me cuss anybody out. They'll never hear me lose my temper on somebody unless that somebody is trying to do harm to somebody else that I love. They will never see me intentionally try to hurt somebody's feelings, right? Now, I may hurt someone's feelings unintentional by something I say, and if I'm made aware of that, they'll see me apologize and own up to my mistakes and things like that. But they'll never see me with intentionality hurt someone, right? It's just not going to happen. So I don't preach to them, be kind, don't be rude, and then I hop on a phone with a customer service rep and just am very rude to them. I don't teach them to be kind, say please and thank you, and then go to a restaurant and completely disrespect my server because I had a hair in my food or something like that, right? I teach them to be over kind, over generous. They don't understand what tipping is. Well, Emma does. JJ's starting to learn, but somebody gives you a service at using the restaurant, for example, and whether if they're exceptional service or not, I'm always going to tip them. That's part of what they do, and they live off those tips. Well, let's be a little extra generous. I explained to them, like, okay, normal people leave 20%. I always try, if it's exceptional, I might go up to 30, 40%. Every once in a while, I might like throw in a gift to somebody and leave $100 tip. Now, we have the resources to do that, right? Not everybody does, but because we do, we are going to take opportunities to be generous and try to help people out. And I want to model that for them. Again, don't ask them to be kind without modeling it for them. Don't ask them to be generous and never donate to anything, or never be generous myself with my time or my resources or anything else. So I think, I've done enough to kind of hammer this point home, but the overall theme is, most of us listen to this, or a lot of us listen to this, have kids or plan to have kids. And it is very difficult. Again, like I said earlier, none of us are going to get it exactly right. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to think everybody else is doing it wrong and we've got it figured out. And all these things are going to be in our head. But at the end of the day, whatever it is you want your kids to develop into, or you have a vision and it's a priority that they are X, Y, Z, kind, generous, loving, positive, athletic, whatever it is you want them to be, you got to model that for them. And if you don't, and if you're trying to force them to be something that you can't be yourself, then good luck. Good luck. They're going to not see an example set for them that you're sitting here preaching them to do. It's, I could go on and on about this, but I think this is a good place to wrap it up. But just be aware of that. If you're a parent, you're aware of it. You're also aware if you're doing the other things, right? You're trying to preach health, and you're barking at your kids to be better athletes, and every time they strike out, you're yelling at them, or they're not completing this or that, but you're going home every night drinking a 6-pack of beer and you're 50 to 100 pounds overweight. Come on. You're not setting a good example for them. How do you expect them to respect, what your authority, and to trying to teach them something when you're not even modeling it yourself? And that goes in every area. If you're being rude to everybody but asking them to be kind, what are you going to do? They're not going to be kind, right? If you are trying to teach them to eat healthy and take care of their body, and you're sitting here eating all the junk food in the pantry and all that stuff, what are you showing them? They're going to follow your example. They're going to, most likely, there's always exceptions to the rule, but most likely they're going to develop into what you showed them an adult should be, right? So just think about that. I could be wrong in a lot of these opinions, but it's just how I see it, and it leads my everyday. Like I said, from the time I get up to every kiss I give my wife in front of my kids, to every interaction I have out in public in front of my kids, to every weight I lift, to every bad and good food I eat or drink, I'm thinking about my kids, right? And what example I'm setting for them. So that'll wrap up today's Burning the Ships podcast. And I look forward, like I said, I got a bunch of great interviews coming down the pipeline. So 2026 is going to be a fantastic year. And I look forward to bringing y'all more podcasts in the future. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Burning the Ships podcast. As always, we want to thank our sponsor, 608B Capital. We are a short-term lending fund, a debt fund, open for investors who are looking for a passive return. And also we offer products our main product to fix and flippers and buy and holders, folks that are doing things like that in real estate. Also want to remind you about our referral program. Check out our website for more information on that, and we're happy to talk to you further if you're interested. Again, thank you for joining us on Burning the Ships, and do me a favor and go out and try to find someone or some way that you can add value into the world today. Think through it, zoom out, and try to find where you can add value. I think it'll help wrap up your day, wrap up your week, whatever you're working on a positive note if you constantly think that way. Where can I add value? So with that, we thank you for joining us on another episode of Burning the Ships. Have a good one.